Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome back.
Said there are jobs at risk. Again, as I said, the export control regulation on human rights, the human rights criteria allows no balancing. Oh, well, there's a risk, but there are jobs. But the comment I would like to add is that we would argue that it is a pernicious argument to assert that Canadian jobs must depend on the killing, maiming, injuring, and repressing of innocent civilians abroad.
That's how it sounded today as a group of NGOs and human rights advocates got together pressuring the Liberal government in an open letter to move back on the Saudi arms deal, calling it immoral and ethical. Now, we know this government has faced some mounting pressure from the human rights groups that have kept on about this controversial deal. Today, we're going to meet one of them, Cesar Jaramillo. He is an executive director of Project Ploughshares. Cesar, thank you for being here.
Happy to be with you. Thanks for having me.
How did this group come together, and why will this controversy not go away?
Well, this is really a very, very collaborative effort. It's a united front from a wide range of groups in Canada that come from the development world, from the arms control world, from the human rights protection world, that shared a common concern about the authorization of the Saudi arms deal, despite what we feel are flagrant, evident, undisputable incompatibilities between the deal and the letter and the spirit of Canadian military export controls.
We have heard this is a deal that cannot be moved back and that they were forced to do it for the good of Canada. And what do you say?
Well, I mean, they've been saying that it cannot be moved back, and they've been playing the irreversibility card for a while. But we challenge that, and every step of the way we have said there is recourse, to pulling back from this misguided decision. And even today, there are, as far as we know, there are no Canadian military weapons from this deal that have been shipped to Saudi Arabia. So it is, in fact, not too late to reconsider the impact that this will have and the direct possibility that Canadian jobs may be contributing to the violation of human rights elsewhere. What's
at stake here? We've heard the government say the Canadian word is at stake, but what about other things? Canada's export control regime. Is there anything else at stake?
Absolutely. First of all, I would say that we do not find persuasive the argument that Canada's word or credibility is at stake. It is only to be expected that an authorization that a deal of this magnitude would be contingent upon the issuance of export permits with compliance with domestic regulations. So we do not believe that Canada's word would suffer in the future if it told other prospective business partners that any deal must comply with domestic regulations. What we do feel is really at stake here is Canada's credibility when it comes to human rights. This particular deal with Saudi Arabia is expected to last at least until the year 2028. So one can think of many occasions in this long time period in which Canada will feel the need to speak out, to speak hard on matters related to the protection of human rights internationally, and we fear that any attempts to speak on human rights will be met with skepticism and with disdain by the international community, because it's sending a mixed message. How can you speak or purport to stand for human rights on the one hand, while arming one of the most repressive regimes on earth on the other hand?
Why do you think the Liberals are so hot about this deal?
Well, the short answer is the jobs angle. I think everybody, even people who are not openly critical of the deal, everybody from a common sense analysis identifies that this deal cannot reasonably comply with the human rights safeguards of Canadian export control. So I think it has to do with the economic gains, with the prospect of job creation, etc. And we admit it's a politically difficult position to be in to expose yourself to being accused of standing in the way of jobs. However, the export control mechanisms of Canada's own government do not have caveats, to to cut corners when there are jobs to be made, or to cut corners when there are strategic concerns to consider. It is very clear. In order for a deal of this, a military deal to continue, the government must determine that there is no reasonable risk of misuse.
Cesar, what is going to happen here? What's at risk for this government? As you say, you feel that the impetus is to save the jobs. We can all understand that politically. What could be what could bite them in the you-know-what later in the future?
Well, the credibility thing is real. The credibility dimension, really, this is going to constitute a big hit on Canada's international credibility. We cannot just with a straight face talk about human rights while arming a repressive regime. Canada has announced its intention to bid for a seat at the highly coveted United Nations Security Council. So we would have, we wonder whether a country that is knowingly exporting weapons to a repressive regime is, whether that is going to count against Canada when it comes to the bid for the UN Security Council. On the other hand, were the government to reconsider, we know for a fact, because polls have been conducted, the majority of Canadians support human rights over job creation, not just in general, but in the specific context of this deal with Saudi Arabia.
All right. What do you think the chances are that they're going to move it back? How has this pressure been felt? Do you have any idea if it's hit the mark?
Well, it has been a process. At first, there were just a few organizations paying attention to this, but I think it's reached a level where it's really gotten a lot of attention from sectors that were sort of quite timid about it in the past. I think they're going to come out and be more outspoken. The government itself opened the door only recently, and they said that they would reconsider, suspend, or cancel even existing permits should new information emerge. Now, given the dire human rights pattern in Saudi Arabia, the abysmal human rights record, we think, it's sadly a matter of time before, new information relevant to this deal emerges. In fact, since the current government has been in power, there have been mass executions. There have been United Nations reports accusing them of war crimes, of systematic and widespread targeting of civilians. So I think the government needs to be held up to its word to say that when such reports do emerge, that it will take it upon itself to actually reconsider.
So you think it's risky because some of the things that may be coming out in the future could really make this a blackened deal?
Well, absolutely. And really, this is the consequences really could be dire. And this isn't a superfluous desire, to throw a wrench in an otherwise legitimate deal. This is a case that is so egregious precisely because the human rights record in Saudi Arabia is so poor, and the deal itself is so large in monetary value. But the third dimension that is very important to consider is that this is not a case of an absence of norms. The norms are clearly there, and they are very unequivocal, very unambiguous. They clearly state that the threshold is reasonable risk. Of late, the government and the Department of Foreign Affairs has taken on this rhetoric, this discourse that says that if they find evidence of misuse, they might reconsider. But that is an absolute misreading of the requirements of export controls. The assessment is not after a human rights violation has occurred, but rather before the export is authorized to assess whether there is, in fact, a reasonable risk. And all the organizations that sent this joint letter, believe that it is very clear that, in fact, it's
already happened. Cesar Jaramillo, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.